December 20th, 1943. Above the industrial heart of Bremen, Germany, the winter sky is about to witness something that will rewrite the rules of aerial warfare forever. Second Lieutenant Charles Yeager violently throws his P-51 Mustang into a hard banking turn as enemy fire tears through the exact space his cockpit occupied just a heartbeat earlier. He is 19 years old. This marks his 8th time facing death in the clouds above enemy territory. His grip on the control stick is trembling so intensely that maintaining steady flight feels nearly impossible. Behind him, closing in for the kill, is Unteroffizier Ludwig Franzescus, a seasoned German pilot flying a Messerschmitt Bf 2109. Franzescus has been hunting Allied aviators for 2 full years. His record shows 11 confirmed victories. He understands every tactic, every defensive move, every desperate maneuver that American pilots attempt when cornered. Right now, he's lining up what should be an easy kill shot. Everything Yeager has been taught screams one message: stay in formation, execute attacks as a coordinated unit, never separate from your wingman under any circumstances. The United States Army Air Forces has invested millions of dollars developing these tactical principles. Fighter squadrons drill these procedures repeatedly until they become muscle memory. The official doctrine is crystal clear: your survival depends entirely on discipline and adherence to the manual. Yeager glances at his instrument panel. His fuel gauge shows dangerously low reserves. The ammunition counter displays 60 rounds remaining. The closest friendly aircraft is 3 miles away, an eternity in aerial combat. By every logical calculation, every tactical assessment, every probability analysis, he should be a confirmed kill within the next 30 seconds. What the experienced German pilot pursuing him cannot possibly know is that this terrified teenager is about to execute a maneuver that violates every single principle in the fighter pilot's handbook. Something so incredibly reckless, so completely counterintuitive, so fundamentally wrong according to established doctrine that senior officers will later dismiss his combat report as impossible, as confused memory from combat stress, as fabricated exaggeration. What happens in the next 60 seconds will accidentally trigger a revolution in air combat tactics that continues to this very day, 80 years later. But before we see how this desperate moment changes everything, we need to understand the crisis facing American fighter pilots in the brutal winter of 1940-3. By December of 1943, the United States Army Air Forces confronts a catastrophic problem that threatens to derail the entire strategic bombing campaign over occupied Europe. The casualty statistics are absolutely devastating, almost impossible to believe. During the Schweinfurt-Regensburg bombing raids in August of 1943, the 8th Air Force loses 60 heavy bombers in a single day. 600 aircrew members are killed or captured in one mission. In October, another strike on Schweinfurt costs 62 additional bombers. The loss rate on deep penetration missions exceeds 20%. At this horrific attrition rate, bomber crews have virtually zero statistical chance of surviving their required 25 mission combat tours. The math is simple and brutal. Most crews will die before completing their service. The fundamental problem is operational range. P-47 Thunderbolts and P-38 Lightnings can escort bomber formations to the German border, but they completely lack the fuel capacity necessary to penetrate deep into Reich-controlled territory. Once the American escorts are forced to turn back toward England, German Luftwaffe fighters descend on the bomber formations like predators surrounding wounded prey. The slaughter is systematic and efficient. The obvious solution seems straightforward: develop long-range escort fighters capable of accompanying bombers all the way to their targets and back. North American aviation has produced the P-51 Mustang, which possesses sufficient fuel capacity to reach Berlin and return to England. This should solve the problem. But there's a second, far more dangerous issue that nobody in command fully recognizes. American fighter doctrine is fundamentally, catastrophically flawed from the ground up. The official tactics manual, written by senior officers who learned to fly in the 90s, places overwhelming emphasis on formation flying and coordinated group attacks. Fighter pilots receive instruction to maintain strict positioning relative to other aircraft, execute textbook maneuvers exactly as written, and never break formation discipline for any reason. Individual initiative is actively discouraged as dangerous and unprofessional. The manual represents gospel truth that cannot be questioned. Meanwhile, German pilots are systematically destroying American fighters using a completely different philosophical approach to aerial combat. Luftwaffe tactical doctrine, refined through years of actual combat experience over Spain, Poland, France, and Russia. emphasizes aggressive individual initiative and flexible response. German aces like Adolf Galland and Gunther Rauel have developed the finger four formation and energy fighting tactics that provide them with enormous tactical advantages over their rigidly trained American opponents. The kill ratio statistics tell the complete story. In late 1943, experienced Luftwaffe pilots are averaging 3 to 4 confirmed kills for every aircraft they lose in combat. Some elite aces, like Egon Meyer and Walter Nau-Otney, have personal kill ratios exceeding 10 to 1. They're not just winning individual engagements, they're dominating the skies. American fighter commanders absolutely know something is desperately wrong. After-action combat reports consistently document American pilots being outmaneuvered in dogfights, despite flying aircraft with comparable or even superior performance characteristics. But the solution continues to elude the command structure. More intensive training in formation flying doesn't help. Neither does stricter enforcement of manual adherence. Disciplinary action against pilots who break formation doesn't improve results. The consensus opinion among senior officers remains unshaken. American pilots simply need better aircraft, more flight training hours, and stricter enforcement of discipline. The tactics themselves are fundamentally sound, validated by decades of aviation theory. The problem must be in execution, not in the doctrine itself. This assumption is about to be completely shattered by a barely educated teenager from Hamlin, West Virginia, who nearly didn't graduate from high school. Charles Elwood Yeager is absolutely not supposed to be here. Flying combat missions over occupied Europe. He grows up in the Appalachian foothills during the depths of the Great Depression. His family struggles with desperate poverty. His father works brutal shifts in the coal mines and natural gas extraction fields. Young Chuck hunts squirrels and rabbits to provide actual food for the family table, developing absolutely exceptional eyesight and hand-eye coordination through years of necessity. He can spot a small squirrel in a dense tree at 300 yards distance. These survival skills from poverty will shortly prove more valuable than any amount of formal education. He enlists in the Army Air Forces in September of 1941. Initially as an aircraft mechanic, he possesses no college education whatsoever. No wealthy family connections that might advance his career. No prior flying experience of any kind. He's assigned to maintain P-39 Airacobra fighters at a remote airfield in Nevada, working long hours in the desert heat. In July of 1942, the Air Forces face a desperate pilot shortage that threatens operational effectiveness. The training pipeline simply cannot produce qualified pilots fast enough to replace mounting combat losses. The service launches an experimental program called the Flying Sergeant Program, allowing enlisted men to train as pilots without receiving officer commissions. Yeager volunteers immediately, seeing it as his only path out of poverty. His superiors are deeply skeptical. His educational background is marginal at best. His mechanical aptitude is excellent, certainly, but flying combat aircraft requires split-second decision-making and advanced spatial reasoning that many believe cannot be taught to someone lacking formal education. Most candidates from his demographic background wash out of the program within weeks. He proves every doubter completely wrong. At flight training schools in California and Arizona, Yeager demonstrates natural flying ability that even experienced instructors find genuinely remarkable. His vision tests at 2010, which means he possesses visual acuity twice as sharp as normal human vision. He can spot enemy aircraft before anyone else in the formation even knows they're present. He graduates from flight training in March of 1943 and receives his commission as a flight officer, the lowest possible officer rank. By November of 1943, Yeager arrives in England, assigned to the 363rd Fighter Squadron, part of the 300 Fighter Group. He has logged approximately 270 total flight hours. Most of his squadron mates possess college degrees from prestigious universities. Many come from wealthy, connected families. Some held private pilot licenses before the war even began. They speak with polished accents and discuss literature and politics. Yeager is the quiet kid from West Virginia who speaks with a thick Appalachian drawl and lacks the social polish of his educated peers. Some squadron mates openly question whether he belongs. He's assigned aircraft number 4-3-6-7-6-3, AP-51B Mustang that he personally names Glamorous Glenn after his girlfriend back home. Glenn is on December 20th, 1943. He climbs into that cockpit for his 8th combat mission, a bomber escort operation to Bremen, Germany. This is the moment when absolutely everything changes. The breakthrough doesn't come from careful study or brilliant tactical analysis. It emerges from pure survival instinct when Ludwig Franciscus's latches onto Yeager's tail, and the young American pilot realizes with absolute certainty that he's about to die. Franciscus fires a burst from his cannons. 20mm shells tear past Yeager's canopy, close enough that he can hear the impacts on his airframe. The German pilot is expertly closing the distance, positioning himself for a perfect deflection shot that will tear through the Mustang's engine and send Yeager spiraling to his death. Every hour of Yeager's training screams the same instructions. Maintain altitude advantage. Execute a standard evasive turning maneuver. Try desperately to reach friendly aircraft for support. Every tactical principle says stay high in the sky, where the Mustang has performance advantages over German fighters. Instead, in a moment of pure instinct, he does something that appears completely insane to any trained observer. He rolls his aircraft completely inverted and pulls the control stick back toward his chest, sending the Mustang into an almost vertical dive toward the German countryside 7,000 feet below. The airspeed indicator spins past 400 miles per hour. Past 450, the Mustang's wings begin to buffet violently as the aircraft approaches its structural design limits. The dive angle is so incredibly steep that Yeager's vision begins to gray from the negative G-forces, crushing him against his harness. This maneuver represents suicide according to every tactical manual. Everyone knows with absolute certainty that German fighters can outdive American aircraft in any scenario. The Bf-109's fuel-injected Daimler-Benz engine provides enormous advantages in negative G maneuvers. Diving away from a pursuing Messerschmitt is precisely exactly what American pilots are trained never to do under any circumstances. It's the last mistake you make before you die. But Yeager isn't consciously thinking about doctrine, or tactics, or training manuals. He's reacting instinctively, like a West Virginia boy who has spent his entire life hunting in the mountains, using terrain for advantage, using speed as a weapon, using every possible advantage available in a desperate situation. The Mustang's Packard-built Rolls-Royce Merlin engine, equipped with its advanced two-stage supercharger, performs in ways that nobody at North American Aviation fully predicted or understood. As Yeager screams toward the ground at suicidal speed, the Mustang actually accelerates faster than the pursuing The airspeed indicator hits 500 miles per hour. The control surfaces are nearly locked completely solid from intense aerodynamic pressure. Moving the stick feels like trying to bend steel. Francis follows the American fighter down, firing repeatedly, absolutely confident that his superior aircraft will close the gap and finish this kill. But something impossible is happening. His rounds are falling increasingly behind the diving Mustang. The American fighter is actually pulling away, gaining distance with every second. At 1,500 feet altitude, with the ground rushing up at terrifying speed, Yeager hauls back on the control stick with both hands, using every ounce of strength in his body. The G-forces instantly slam him brutally into his seat. His vision tunnels to a narrow point of light. The Mustang's wings flex dramatically upward, stressed almost to the point of catastrophic structural failure. The aircraft bottoms out from its dive at 800 feet altitude, still traveling at 480 miles per hour. Francis attempts to follow through the same maneuver. His Messerschmitt pulls out at 600 feet, but the violent pullout has bled away all his kinetic energy. His airspeed has dropped to just 320 miles per hour. Yeager levels his aircraft, looks back over his shoulder, and sees something that, according to every tactical manual, should be completely impossible. The German fighter that was actively killing him just 30 seconds earlier is now behind him, slow and completely vulnerable, struggling to regain energy. Franciscus is desperately attempting to regain both speed and altitude, but he's exposed and defenseless. Yeager reverses his turn, climbs slightly to gain a better firing angle, and positions himself directly behind the Messerschmitt. At 400 yards distance, he fires a 3-second burst from his 650 caliber machine guns. Armor-piercing rounds tear into the German fighter's wing root and fuselage structure. The Messerschmitt rolls violently to the left, trailing thick smoke, and begins spiraling toward the ground below. Yeager has just executed the very first recorded high-speed vertical maneuver that will later be called the yo-yo in the entire history of combat aviation. He doesn't know that's what military theorists will eventually call it. He doesn't even fully comprehend what he's just accomplished. He just knows with absolute certainty that he survived an engagement when he absolutely shouldn't have. When he lands back at RAF Leiston and reports the engagement to his squadron commander, the reaction is immediate and completely dismissive. That is absolutely impossible, the commander states flatly. The unknown outperforms our aircraft in every conceivable dive scenario. You must have misidentified the aircraft type. Perhaps it was a different German fighter. The intelligence officer's after-action report expresses deep skepticism about Yeager's account. The gun camera footage proves inconclusive. The dive was too violent, too extreme. The camera couldn't maintain proper tracking through such violent maneuvering. Several senior pilots carefully review Yeager's detailed account and dismiss it as confused memory resulting from combat stress. You simply cannot outdive a Messerschmitt, explains Major Thomas Hayes, the group operations officer. Their fuel injection system provides them with decisive advantages in negative G maneuvers. This is established engineering fact that cannot be disputed. The official tactical doctrine remains crystal clear. American fighters should maintain altitude advantage at all times and rely on coordinated group attacks. Diving away from pursuing enemy fighters is explicitly, strongly discouraged in every tactics manual. What Yeager describes violates fundamental combat principles that senior officers learned years ago at the prestigious Air Corps Tactical School. His report is filed away and largely forgotten. But Yeager isn't alone in his experience. Over the following 3 weeks, other pilots begin independently reporting remarkably similar experiences in combat. Lieutenant William Wisner executes a near-vertical dive to escape to attacking Focke-Wulf 190s and discovers exactly the same phenomenon. At extreme speeds exceeding 450 miles per hour, the Mustang's performance characteristics change dramatically in ways that contradict official specifications. Captain Don Blakesley, commander of the 4th Fighter Group and one of the most experienced American combat pilots in the entire European theater, makes the critical decision to investigate these reports seriously rather than dismissing them. On January 11, 1944, he personally takes a P-51B 225,000 feet altitude over the English Channel and executes a comprehensive series of high-speed dive tests, carefully documenting the results. What he discovers is absolutely startling and contradicts years of accepted wisdom. Below 20,000 feet altitude, in dives exceeding 450 miles per hour, the Mustang consistently accelerates faster than any German fighter aircraft in service. The advanced two-stage supercharger, originally designed purely for high-altitude performance, creates completely unexpected aerodynamic advantages at high speed and low altitude. Nobody at North American Aviation predicted this characteristic. Blakesley writes an extremely detailed technical report and submits it directly to 8th Air Force Fighter Command Headquarters. The response from senior leadership is immediate and intensely hostile. At a commander's meeting on January 18, 1944, Blakesley formally presents his test findings to assembled senior officers. The room absolutely erupts in anger and dismissal. Senior officers who have been flying combat aircraft since the 1920s are being directly told that their fundamental assumptions about fighter combat tactics are completely wrong, that a barely educated kid from West Virginia has somehow discovered tactical principles that they completely missed despite decades of combined experience. This is reckless cowboy flying, declares Colonel Hubert Zem, commander of the 56th Fighter Group. We absolutely cannot abandon proven coordinated tactics for individual heroics. That kind of undisciplined flying is precisely what gets pilots killed unnecessarily. Your test data is fundamentally flawed, argues another full colonel. German fighters have superior fuel injection systems. We have carburetors that cut out under negative G. Basic physics doesn't lie. Your conclusions are impossible. The meeting threatens to end with Blakesley's comprehensive report being filed away and completely forgotten. The bureaucratic inertia is absolutely enormous. Changing established doctrine requires publicly admitting that previous doctrine was dangerously wrong. Senior officers have built their entire careers on the existing tactical system. Admitting error could end those careers. Then Major General William Kepner, commander of 8th Fighter Command, makes the critical intervention that changes everything. Kepner is a genuine maverick in the command structure. He originally learned to fly back in 1916. He flew actual combat missions during World War I. He has personally watched far too many young pilots die, following tactics that simply don't work against experienced enemies. Unlike many senior officers, he's genuinely willing to challenge conventional wisdom when solid evidence demands reconsideration. Gentlemen, Kepner states firmly, silencing the room, I frankly don't care if Captain Blakesley's findings contradict everything we learned at tactical school 20 years ago. I care exclusively about kill ratios and pilot survival rates. Captain Blakesley's group currently has the highest combat success rate in this entire theater. If his pilots are surviving engagements by breaking established rules, then perhaps our rules are fundamentally wrong and need immediate revision. Kepner orders immediate, comprehensive testing using multiple aircraft and pilots. Over the next 2 weeks, experienced test pilots put P-51B Mustangs through extreme dive profiles under controlled conditions, carefully documenting every result. The accumulated data definitively confirms Blakesley's controversial findings. At speeds above 450 miles per hour, the Mustang's acceleration in a steep dive measurably exceeds that of both the Messerschmitt Bf-109 and the Focke-Wulf 190. On February 3, 1944, General Kepner issues an absolutely revolutionary tactical directive that will change American fighter doctrine forever. Fighter pilots are officially authorized to use individual initiative and aggressive tactics, explicitly including high-speed diving attacks against enemy aircraft. The old emphasis on rigid formation discipline is dramatically de-emphasized. Pilots are actively encouraged to exploit the Mustang's superior high-performance characteristics through aggressive individual maneuvering. The old guard of senior officers is absolutely appalled by this radical departure from established doctrine. But Kepner possesses the command authority, and he exercises it without hesitation or apology. Before we examine how this tactical revolution transforms the air war over Europe, I want to take just a moment to tell you about this channel's core mission. We bring you deeply researched stories of innovation and human courage that genuinely changed the course of history. Stories that standard textbooks often completely miss or badly oversimplify. If you value this kind of in-depth research and documentary quality content that goes far beyond surface-level history, please take just 1 second to hit that subscribe button right now. 92% of regular viewers watch our content without subscribing, but your subscription directly helps us justify the extensive research hours that these detailed episodes require. Thank you genuinely for your support. The revolutionary new tactics received their first major combat test almost immediately. On February 20, 1944, the 8th Air Force launches Operation Argument, which military historians will later call Big Week. Over 1,000 heavy bombers strike German aircraft manufacturing facilities deep inside Reich territory. They're escorted by P-51 Mustangs flying with General Kepner's brand new tactical doctrine for the very first time. March 3, 1944. The sky above Berlin, the heavily defended capital of Nazi Germany. Yeager, now credited with 12 confirmed aerial victories, leads a flight of 4 Mustangs at 28,000 feet altitude. Far below them, 300 B-17 Flying Fortress bombers are approaching the German capital in massive formation. Luftwaffe fighter squadrons are rising from airfields across the region to intercept the raid. Messerschmitt Bf-109s and Focke-Wulf 190s from elite units including Jägerschwader 3 and Jägerschwader 11. Some of Germany's most experienced and decorated fighter wings. Oberleutnant Heinz Böhm, a legendary German ace with over 100 confirmed kills, leads a formation of 4 Bf-109 G6S, the latest production variant. He spots Yeager's flight high above and begins a climbing attack, planning to use his altitude advantage to execute a classic diving pass on the exposed bomber formation below. Yeager spots them first. His exceptional vision, honed through years of hunting in West Virginia mountains, provides him with 30 critical seconds of warning time that most pilots wouldn't have. Instead of maintaining defensive formation and executing a textbook coordinated defense as he was originally trained, he does something that would have been explicitly forbidden just 3 months earlier. He rolls his Mustang completely inverted and dives at maximum power, not away from the German fighters in retreat, but directly toward them at a slight angle, building absolutely enormous speed through aggressive descent. His wingman, Lieutenant Clarence Bud Anderson, follows Yeager's lead without a moment's hesitation or question. The other 2 Mustangs in the flight maintain high cover position, ready to support if needed. Bauer observes the American fighters diving and naturally assumes they're fleeing the engagement. Retreating from superior German numbers, he adjusts his formation's approach vector toward the vulnerable bombers ahead. This is precisely exactly what Yeager calculated he would do. At 600 miles per hour, a speed so extreme that the control surfaces feel like they're welded completely solid, Yeager pulls up hard underneath Böhm's formation from below and behind. The German Messerschmitts are traveling at approximately 380 miles per hour, completely focused on the bomber formation ahead. They never see the American Mustangs approaching from their vulnerable underside at incredible closing speed. Yeager fires a concentrated 2-second burst at the trailing Messerschmitt. The German fighter literally explodes in midair from the devastating impact. Bauer breaks hard left in desperate evasion, but Anderson is already perfectly positioned there, firing accurately. Böhm's wingman goes down trailing sheets of flame. spiraling toward the ground. The two remaining German Messerschmitts dive away at maximum speed, abandoning the attack entirely. Yeager and Anderson don't pursue them into the dive. Instead, they use their massive speed advantage to climb back to altitude, regaining their defensive position above the bomber formation. The entire violent engagement lasts exactly 45 seconds, from initial contact to conclusion. Two elite German fighters completely destroyed, 0 American losses. The bomber formation continues absolutely unmolested to their primary target. This exact tactical pattern repeats itself across the sky throughout the entire day. American pilots employing the new aggressive tactics are achieving kill ratios that were literally impossible under the old rigid formation doctrine. The Luftwaffe, long accustomed to predictable American formations and defensive maneuvers, suddenly faces aggressive individual attacks coming from completely unexpected angles and altitudes. The statistical numbers tell the complete story with brutal clarity. In January 1944, before widespread adoption of the new tactics, 8th Fighter Command's kill ratio against the Luftwaffe averages approximately 2.1 to 1, acceptable, but not dominant. By April 1944, after widespread adoption of energy fighting tactics across all fighter groups, that ratio climbs dramatically to 4.3 to 1. By June, it reaches 6.1 to 1. American fighters are now achieving air superiority through tactical innovation. German pilots noticed the fundamental change immediately and reported to their commanders. Oberleutnant Johann Steinhoff, a veteran ace with extensive combat experience, writes in his personal diary, "The American fighters have changed completely. They no longer fly in rigid, predictable formations. They dive from impossible altitudes at absolutely terrifying speeds. Our fuel-injected engines, which gave us such decisive advantages for years, no longer matter strategically. They are somehow faster than us now, in the scenarios that matter most." Generalmajor Adolf Galland, overall commander of Germany's entire fighter force, reports directly to Reichsmarschall Hermann Göring in April 1944. The American Mustang pilots have successfully adopted our own energy fighting tactics and have actually improved upon them significantly. Their aircraft's high-speed performance characteristics exceed our capabilities in critical combat scenarios. We are losing experienced pilots at an absolutely unsustainable rate that we cannot replace. The bomber crews notice the dramatic change as well. Survival rates improve remarkably almost overnight. Lieutenant James Howard, AB-17 pilot, writes in a letter home, "The fighter boys escorting us are completely different now. They don't just escort us defensively anymore. They actively hunt the enemy. The German pilots are genuinely scared of them now." May 8, 1944. Yeager encounters his most technically challenging opponent yet, Hauptmann Georg Peter Eder, a highly decorated German ace with 36 confirmed kills, flying a Messerschmitt Bf 109 G10, the absolute latest variant with significantly improved performance characteristics. The engagement occurs at 24,000 feet altitude over Brunswick. Eder possesses altitude advantage and initiates a classic diving attack from above. Yeager reverses directly into him, forcing a dangerous head-on passing shot. Both pilots fire simultaneously. Both completely miss in the brief moment of passing. Eder fully expects Yeager to climb away after the pass, attempting to regain altitude advantage through standard procedure. Instead, Yeager immediately rolls inverted and dives nearly vertical, building tremendous speed exactly as he did 6 months earlier over Bremen. Eder follows confidently, completely certain in his aircraft's superior diving performance based on years of experience. At 550 miles per hour, Yeager executes a brutally hard pullout and reverses direction. Eder attempts to follow through the same maneuver, but the G-forces prove far too severe. His vision grays completely. He nearly blacks out. His pullout ends up much more shallow than intended. When his vision clears and he recovers full awareness, Yeager has somehow maneuvered behind him at 400 yards distance. Yeager fires a sustained burst. Eder's Messerschmitt takes multiple direct hits in the engine cowling and wing structure. Thick smoke pours from the damaged engine. Eder barely manages to nurse his crippled fighter back to his home airfield, but the aircraft is completely written off as a total loss. After the war ends, Eder writes in his memoirs, "The American pilot who destroyed my aircraft on May 8, 1944, executed maneuvers I genuinely thought were physically impossible. He dove away from superior position and somehow ended up behind me with perfect firing solution. Our intelligence briefings specifically stated this could not happen with American fighters. We were completely wrong. By June 1944, the Luftwaffe faces an existential crisis it cannot solve. Experienced pilots are being killed in combat faster than training programs can possibly replace them. Training programs are dramatically shortened out of desperation, producing poorly prepared replacement pilots who frequently die on their very first combat missions. The 8th Air Force achieves complete air superiority over Germany for the first time in the war. The human cost is absolutely measurable in saved lives. Bomber loss rates drop catastrophically from 20% in October 1943 to less than 4% by June 1944. Thousands of aircrew members survive missions they statistically should have died on under the old defensive tactics. After the war finally ends, a B-17 pilot named Robert Morgan tracks down Yeager at a public airshow event. Morgan flew 30 complete missions over Germany in 1944. He approaches Yeager and tells him directly, "My entire crew calculated that we should have been shot down on our 8th mission based on 1943 loss rate statistics. We flew 22 more missions after that supposedly fatal 8th mission. Because of you and pilots like you who figured this out, we came home alive. My children exist today because you figured out how to keep us alive up there." The tactical impact extends far beyond World War II. The energy fighting tactics accidentally discovered by Yeager and systematically developed by commanders like Blakesley become the absolute foundation of modern fighter doctrine that continues today. If you genuinely want to support this channel's deep dive research into forgotten military innovations that changed history, please click that like button right now and consider joining our Patreon community. Your direct support makes these extensively researched episodes possible. Thank you. Charles L. Wood. Yeager ends World War II with 11.5 confirmed aerial victories. He's shot down once over occupied France, successfully evades capture with help from French resistance fighters, and returns to combat operations. He flies 64 total combat missions. After the war concludes, he transitions into experimental test flying. On October 14, 1947, he breaks the sound barrier, flying the Bell X-1 rocket plane, becoming the very first human being to fly faster than sound. The energy management techniques he learned in desperate combat, high-speed control, aggressive maneuvering, prove absolutely essential for supersonic flight testing. He retires from the Air Force as a brigadier general in 1975. After an extraordinary career, he never personally claims to have invented energy fighting tactics. In his autobiography, he writes with characteristic humility, "I was just desperately trying not to die that day. If what I did accidentally helped other pilots survive their missions, I'm deeply grateful. But I didn't figure anything out intellectually. I just reacted instinctively to survive." The combat tactics he accidentally pioneered are still taught today to every fighter pilot. Every single fighter pilot in the United States Air Force, Navy, and Marine Corps learns fundamental energy fighting principles during their very first weeks of flight training. The concept of trading altitude for speed, using high-velocity maneuvers to gain positional advantage, exploiting aircraft performance at extreme speeds, these principles remain absolutely fundamental to modern air combat doctrine. The P-51 Mustang, optimized for the tactics Yeager helped develop through desperate improvisation, becomes the most successful American fighter aircraft of World War II. North American Aviation produces over 15,000 Mustangs during the war. They destroy more than 4,500 enemy aircraft in air-to-air combat, more than any other Allied fighter type in any theater. The 357th Fighter Group, Yeager's unit, achieves the highest kill ratio of any American fighter group in the entire European theater, 5.7 to 1. They destroy 609 enemy aircraft while losing 106 of their own. Their extraordinary success results directly from early adoption of energy fighting tactics. Don Blakesley, who fought bureaucratic resistance to validate Yeager's accidental discovery, retires as a full colonel with 15.5 confirmed victories. He never receives the Medal of Honor, despite being recommended 3 separate times by different commanders. He tells an interviewer in 1989, "The real heroes were kids like Yeager, who figured things out when absolutely everyone told them they were wrong. I just had enough rank to make sure people actually listened." William Kepner, the general who overruled his entire staff and authorized the revolutionary new tactics, retires as a lieutenant general. His February 1944 directive is still studied at military academies worldwide as a textbook example of leadership, the courage to challenge established doctrine when evidence absolutely demands reconsideration. The German pilots who survived the war speak respectfully of their American Opponents in post-war interviews. Johann Steinhoff, who became a general in the post-war West German Luftwaffe, writes in 1977, by mid-1944, American fighter pilots had completely surpassed us in both tactics and aggressiveness. They learned and adapted faster than we could possibly counter. The Mustang pilots especially, they were genuinely exceptional. The lesson extends far beyond aviation history. Innovation often emerges from completely unexpected sources. The teenager from West Virginia with minimal formal education saw something that experienced officers with decades of training completely missed. The military system nearly rejected his discovery entirely because it contradicted established doctrine and came from someone without credentials. How many other genuine innovations have been lost throughout history because they came from the wrong person or challenged the wrong established assumptions. How many lives could have been saved across countless fields if organizations were better at recognizing truth, regardless of its source or the credentials of the messenger? Charles Elwood Yeager dies on December 7, 2020, at age 9. His obituary in the New York Times calls him the most famous test pilot of his generation. It extensively mentions breaking the sound barrier. It mentions his impressive combat record. It doesn't mention at all that he accidentally revolutionized air combat tactics by doing something everyone said was impossible. Sometimes the greatest innovations come not from careful planning or academic study, but from desperate improvisation under pressure, not from recognized experts following established procedures, but from outsiders who don't know what's supposed to be impossible, according to the textbooks. Charles Yeager didn't set out to change military doctrine that day over Bremen. He just desperately wanted to survive his 8th combat mission. That he accomplished survival by breaking every single rule in the official book, and in the process accidentally saved thousands of lives over the following years, is precisely what makes his story so remarkable and worth remembering. The next time someone confidently tells us something is impossible because it contradicts established wisdom or accepted theory, remember the 19-year-old kid from West Virginia, who was too inexperienced and uneducated to know he couldn't outdive a Messerschmitt sometimes. Not knowing the rules is exactly what allows you to break through and discover something genuinely new.